The idea of a professor leaving the safety of established academia to build a new institute or even a university sounds audacious, perhaps even reckless. Universities have centuries of tradition, vast infrastructure, and deep funding streams. To challenge that as an individual feels almost impossible. And yet, history tells us that many transformative institutions began as the vision of one or a few determined scholars. Humboldt's university reform in Berlin, the Santa Fe Institute for Complexity Science, even the first research universities in the US, all started as radical departures from the status quo. Doesn't this suggest that what looks like hubris at first can, under the right conditions, crystallize into a lasting academic legacy? From a practical perspective, establishing a research institute requires three intertwined pillars: legal and organizational structure, sustainable funding, and intellectual mission. The legal structure can range from a non-profit foundation to a company limited by guarantee, depending on jurisdiction. Funding sources may begin with grants, philanthropy, or partnerships with industry and government, but they must be diversified to ensure resilience. Most crucially, the mission must be unique. An institute cannot merely copy what universities already do. It must carve out a niche where it can lead, an emerging discipline, an interdisciplinary frontier, or a problem space that established institutions overlook. Could it be that the hardest part is not money or buildings, but crafting a vision bold enough to justify starting anew? The philosophers of education note a paradox. Universities today are both indispensable and often sluggish. Their scale brings prestige and resources, but also bureaucracy and inertia. Independent institutes, in contrast, can be nimble, testing new models of teaching, publishing, and collaboration that large universities resist. The Santa Fe Institute, for example, succeeded because it focused relentlessly on complexity science, built a collaborative culture, and attracted world-class visiting scholars without trying to become a full university. Perhaps the lesson is that success requires focus. Trying to be everything leads to collapse, but being the place for X can establish credibility. Lesser-known perspective is that accreditation and recognition often lag behind innovation. An institute may flourish as a hub for research, conferences, and publishing without formal degree-granting powers for years. Over time, if credibility grows and partnerships with established universities develop, the path toward becoming a degree-granting university may open. The key transitional strategies are publishing influential research, attracting outstanding people, and creating visible value to society. Whether in science, technology, or education. Isn't it striking that legitimacy in academia often follows reputation, not the other way around? The paradox, then, is that founding a research institute or university requires both radical independence and deep interdependence. Independence to shape a mission and culture outside traditional structures. Interdependence to connect with funders, collaborators, governments, and existing universities that can lend credibility. To succeed, one must hold both in balance. The haunting question for a professor in transition is not whether it can be done, it can, but whether they can define a vision so distinct, so necessary, that the world will rally around it. For those who do, the reward is not just a career shift, but the creation of an institution that may outlive its founder. For many professors, a career follows the well-worn path of PhD, postdoc, tenure track, then senior academic leadership. Yet, at some point, the incremental gains from another paper or another grant diminish. The paradox emerges. The very system that rewards creativity also boxes it in with rigid hierarchies, fixed funding models, and slow institutional change. For a professor in transition, the question arises, why continue climbing inside one pyramid when one could build a new pyramid from scratch? After years at elite universities, some scholars, like Minerva's founders, left to start entirely new institutions that challenge the model of higher education. It is like a master chef deciding not to earn one more Michelin star in someone else's restaurant, but to open a new kitchen with a new menu. Establishing an institute requires more than vision. It demands legal identity, whether as a nonprofit or private entity, governance structures such as a board of directors and advisory council, funding sources from grants, philanthropy, and partnerships, and physical or digital infrastructure in the form of labs, classrooms, or online platforms. Accreditation may be optional for early research institutes, but essential for degree-granting universities. The first step is often small: registering an organization with a clear mission and bylaws. Success builds in layers, starting with a small lab or online academy before growing into a recognized hub. The Santa Fe Institute, for instance, began with a handful of interdisciplinary scientists and a modest budget, but became world-famous for complexity science. It is like planting a seed. The structure is tiny at first, but roots and branches grow with time, resources, and nurturing. New institutes face skepticism. Are they real? Legitimacy comes from output, high-quality publications, partnerships, trained students, and recognized fellows. Endorsements from respected figures or institutions accelerate trust. In parallel, branding and communication matter, since a clear identity with logo, website, and values signals seriousness. Unlike established universities that inherit centuries of reputation, a new institute must prove itself in years. The paradox is that legitimacy is earned through impact, but impact requires initial trust. The Kavli Institutes achieved recognition quickly because they were tied to prestigious universities and well-funded philanthropic backing. It is like starting a new orchestra. The only way to prove it can perform Beethoven is by playing, not by claiming expertise. No institute survives on vision alone. Stable funding streams must be built from a mix of sources: national grants, philanthropic donations, industry partnerships, student fees in the case of universities, or revenue from intellectual property. Endowments secure long-term sustainability. The paradox here is dependence. The more independent an institute wishes to be in spirit, the more dependent it may initially be on external funders. Strategic alignment with global challenges, climate, health, AI, or quantum, makes funding pitches compelling. The Broad Institute leveraged a combination of philanthropy from LI and Edithi Broad and NIH partnerships to become a genomic powerhouse. It is like launching a ship. Vision charts the course, but without steady supplies, the voyage cannot last. Institutes succeed when they gather people who believe in the mission. Attracting top researchers, postdocs, and students requires offering something unique. Intellectual freedom, cross-disciplinary platforms, or cutting-edge tools unavailable elsewhere. Community is also cultural. Shared seminars, collaborative spirit, and openness to risk. Recruiting talent is not just about salaries, but about purpose. The paradox is that brilliant individuals are drawn to prestige, yet prestige itself must be built by those very individuals. The Perimeter Institute in Canada attracted leading theoretical physicists by offering freedom to explore fundamental questions with strong institutional support. It is like forming a jazz band. The best players come if they know improvisation is encouraged and not stifled. The key requirement is to answer what makes this institute different. New universities cannot simply replicate Harvard or Oxford. They must experiment with online platforms, flipped classrooms, interdisciplinary curricula, micro-credentialing, or integration of research and entrepreneurship. Research institutes must focus on frontiers neglected by mainstream academia, whether quantum biology, nanomotors, or AI-driven science. Differentiation ensures visibility and survival in a crowded ecosystem. Minerva University differentiated by abandoning the physical campus and building a fully global online model for elite education. It is like opening a restaurant in a city full of steakhouses. Success requires a new cuisine, not the same menu. The journey is perilous. Regulatory hurdles, accreditation delays, unstable funding, brain drain, and resistance from traditional academia can all cripple a new institute. Building infrastructure such as labs and housing requires massive capital, and even online, competing with established MOOCs is hard. Failure is common, but the risks are part of innovation. The paradox is that the very qualities that make a professor bold enough to found a new institute, ambition, independence, nonconformity, are the same that may alienate funders and allies. Several startup universities collapsed after running out of funds or failing to meet accreditation, despite strong initial enthusiasm. It is like climbing Everest. The vision inspires, but without oxygen, ropes, and guides, the summit kills. The successful path usually begins small: a legally registered nonprofit, an online academy, or a specialized research hub. Partnerships with established universities can lend credibility. Hosting international conferences and publishing in top journals spreads influence. Scaling requires disciplined management, separating governance from research, building advisory boards, and professionalizing fundraising. A long-term horizon of 10-20 years must guide decisions. Success is less about speed than persistence. Olin College of Engineering began with a small, experimental cohort and gradually scaled into one of the most innovative engineering schools in the U.S. It is like tending a vineyard. The first harvest may be thin, but decades of cultivation yield a reputation that lasts centuries. The paradox is that professors are trained to deepen knowledge, not to build institutions. Yet, building an institute may be the most impactful form of scholarship, creating a platform for thousands of others to generate knowledge. For a professor in transition, the choice is stark: continue producing within old structures, or create a new structure that reshapes the landscape itself. The success of such a venture depends on vision, pragmatism, and persistence. Failure is possible, but so is leaving behind not just papers, but a living institution. When John Martinis left Google Quantum AI, he chose not to retreat into academia, but to continue shaping quantum research ecosystems in new formats. It is like moving from being a solo musician to founding a conservatory. Impact shifts from single performances to cultivating future symphonies.